what I'm going to talk about is my learnings of leadership particularly under Steve Jobs, and at a time of huge disruption in the personal computer world. I think we've come full circle because we're now in the digital disruption in the fourth revolution. So that's what my goal is going to be today. And I'm going to break it down into the different styles of leadership in a disruptive, in a changing business transformation world, the different styles of leadership. I love this picture of Carnegie Library in Washington, DC. It's very recent. So I'm bringing you bang up to date to the latest Apple computer store. That is the Carnegie Library in Washington, DC, just up the road from the White House. Absolutely. Well, the visionary boss I had of Steve Jobs. Steve was the ultimate disruptor, and he literally started off. He ran what was called the Macintosh engineering team. He's, later on we know him as being CEO and very, very senior. And of course he was senior, but he was put into creating the Macintosh team. Leaders like him are not always understood. Even someone like Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the World Wide Web, somebody wrote when he presented his paper, I believe, somebody wrote about the internet, an interesting concept, but not worth exploring. It will never catch on. And I think the thing about leaders like Steve Jobs, he's very edgy. He was very edgy, and he encouraged a rebellious questioning. And that's certainly one of the characteristics I learned. We were encouraged to be challenging and to be creative, but to do it to challenge the status quo. He absolutely did that. Do leaders have power by their title, or do they have them by the nature of the way that they work, their style? And this is one of the things that I'm going to take through with you. Is power or success by association, or is having power the same as leadership? So I started off with Washington, DC, the Apple Library, the Carnegie Library Apple store there. Here is my very first office, which was the Apple campus, one infinite loop. I was never a computer person. I didn't even know what an infinite loop was. I'm just going to read you out the definition, because this is a time of computer programming. I'm taking you way back to 1984. Computer programming, infinite loop, is a sequence of instructions that will continue endlessly unless an external intervention occurs. Unless an external intervention occurs. This was what Steve Jobs did with the Macintosh division. He literally flew a pirate flag outside the office, outside the building, and he basically created an isolation, an exclusion from the rest of the Apple computer team and company. And Steve Jobs said, one of his quotes, and I use this really as the title of a leadership presentation, which is, he said, "It's better to be a pirate than to join the Navy." And he epitomized that. And I think there's something to think about as a leader, because there he is. I'm sorry, it's not a very clear image. It's quite an old one of mine, but this is John Scully, who he hired, and who is to me, the epitome of the disciplinarian and the captain. He had to bring somebody in. The board made Steve bring someone in to really change the business acceptance of the Apple Macintosh. So the Apple Mac was was totally unique, and in the graphics, with this graphics interface, in an environment of computing that was totally mainframe driven. Big Blue was IBM, Everybody had a terminal or a PC, and if you were using a personal computer, you were probably writing in a program. You were probably writing MS-DOS. So the creation of the Macintosh was something completely new. I'm going to show you a video. It's iconic. 1984 was the launch of the Apple Macintosh, and Ridley Scott, who did Blade Runner, a very dystopian image, he used this advert. It was really expensive, and it was in the 1984 Super Bowl in the halftime ad. And the idea of this advert is that you have Big Blue, IBM being the monolith, everyone else having to be completely structured and programmatic. And then you have the launch of the Macintosh that completely blows away this. It makes us as humans personally creative. It enables us to use the computer without the barrier of the programming in front. So the metaphor he used was this gorgeous athlete breaking into the dystopian world of George Orwell's 1984. Just a little bit of backstory. It was filmed in London. Ridley Scott had 300 skinheads, and they were in this huge warehouse, and they were pretty difficult to herd around, I believe. But when you see it, you'll see that the effect it had, and I just think it kind of summarizes the whole business position of the Apple Macintosh in the corporate world.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification methods. Created for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of a complicated influence. Of course, is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our hands talk themselves to life, and we will carry them with their own courage. We shall prevail.
January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
That kind of just gives you some context of where we were in this environment. And the key thing about the Macintosh was that it was just brilliant. It was absolutely unique. But unfortunately, the business world just wasn't accepting it because it was graphic. It also had very little software, because at the time, obviously, the technological platform was the operating system. And Steve Jobs wanted to close it up and keep it proprietary and not open it up, which was totally, from a market share perspective, it's a complete disaster. So that's why Steve was asked to bring in someone who could change the market share to actually, promote the Macintosh into the business environment. So this is where I came in. I was at university and doing English literature, and had a chance to go and do a 6-week job to pay for my fees. Recognize that, some of you? Yep, to help pay for my fees. So I said, yeah, absolutely, of course I'll do that. My husband said, I said, what is it? And he said, oh, it's going to be selling computers. There's this new company and they're coming into Europe and they're selling computers. I said, no, I don't do computers. No, give it a go. So I gave it a go, absolutely loved it. And I was very lucky and I sold more than anyone else. So they hired me, which was just unbelievable. But what was unbelievable about was the risk. This is a 128K Macintosh with 2 pieces of software. It was Paint and Word. I mean, you couldn't do anything in the business world with it, but we were literally letting people test drive it, go out of the store. And by the way, this was £2,000. £2,000. You'd put it in a bag, still have the bag, and you'd carry it, well, lug it, because it was quite heavy. And people would just take we didn't have Apple stores then, but it would go in the equivalent of a PC World or a Currys. You had to sign away. We had to credit cards from people, and literally they took them away and tried it. So it was just such a brilliant campaign to so risky to do that. So then I joined Apple, and this is where Bill Gates comes in, because of course once Microsoft had started could produce software, business software for the Macintosh, and the key, that's a really young Bill Gates, that's unbelievable. But the key thing about Microsoft was that they created Excel, and even though every one of you, I believe, we all use Excel, but just a little bit of fact, piece of trivia, the Excel was produced on the Apple Mac first. And I went to the BAFTA Theatre. We went and launched it to the British press, and I stood next to Bill Gates, and we presented this. By then, powerful piece of software, because the Macintosh was a 512K Macintosh, but we had an extra hard drive, and it was churning away and doing this tiny piece of Excel. But it was just revolutionary. It was just revolutionary. The key ideology here between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs was that they were going to change the world. They're going to do it by changing the way we as people, we could use computers. Listen, if I could use it, then that it just changed everybody's mindset. It made us more personally productive. You could go on and you could you didn't have a block by being a computer programmer. You could actually go straight in. So here is Steve and John Scully. So Steve courted John Scully. John was the president of PepsiCo, and he was known for being, and still is, he's a great mentor of mine. He's a stunning marketeer. He had a campaign where it was called the Pepsi Challenge, and literally there were people all over the US standing outside Walmart stores with you, and you could try the taste. It was a taste test, but he was a brilliant marketeer, very disciplined, very strategic, and he was brought in to change the perception and image of the Macintosh in the corporate world. It's almost like a David and Goliath situation. But Apple was the little David, and IBM was the Goliath. This is me with Bill Gates, because I had, I'm going to not even show that one. I'm going to show this one. So I had a portfolio of accounts, and I was again in the right place at the right time with the most brilliant computer, because by then the Mac had just evolved into a powerful business machine, which British Petroleum took to standardize on globally. The reason that this was so important for Apple was that up until now, we had only had big corporate accounts that were US based as their HQ. Whereas here with British Petroleum, it was European based. And so the subsidiaries were in the US. So this is really an incredible moment, and just fantastic to be able to be part of it.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I watched, like many of you last night, maybe have watched Glastonbury, and just watching David Bowie Changes that he wrote many years away. And I just think, you know, there's so much about how we manage change, how we react to it. It's we can't change what's happening, but we can change how we react to situations. And again, that's a key thing that I learned. The key thing that we need to remember is that just try and, when it's all becoming overwhelming, that a clarity brings certainty. And when we have certainty, then that lowers our anxiety. If that helps somehow, just trying to make it clear, break things down in very simple strokes. The key things that I learned here, as I said, I learned to be proactive without causing a commotion, to have this clarity, to be willing to make tough and risky calls, but try to maintain a very high emotional intelligence. I'm keep coming back down to this because I think being a people person and putting yourself in the views, in the position of other people, helps hugely gaining solutions and clarity. Motivation comes from inside, but hugely it comes from people who believe in you, who believe in your potential and your capacity. And John definitely did that for me here, and so did all of my managers in Apple. They believed in my potential and my capacity to be successful. And I think as a leader and as a manager in a very disruptive, challenging world now, that's what we need, whatever position you're in. And I do like this particular phrase, polite and velvety leaders take care to avoid bruising others. We all should take care to avoid bruising, but that's not so effective as forcing change. Many colleagues ended these horror stories by saying, like me, he got them to do things they never dreamt possible. And he created a corporation crammed with A players. So the key thing to think about as a leader is that you can be flawed, but it's about creating the environment for individuals to be able to cope with change. And I think that's definitely something that we need now in this, you know, rapidly disruptive post-COVID-19 world.